Right. There's some people trickling in. Happy hump day, everyone. For people that are in the middle or the last week of the end of their quarter, hope you're getting some sleep. How you doing, Shay? Eat high and tight. All right, letting a couple of people trickle in here and we'll get going. I was talking to Shay and I don't think he's on stage yet. Here we go.
There we go. I'm
Yeah.
on stage.
Yeah, now we got you.
All
How you
right.
doing?
I'm good.
Good
I'm
to see you,
great.
man. Good to see you. I appreciate you sharing some wisdom with folks. I'm going
Yeah, of course.
to try to get the crowd engaged a bit here. We had like 150 people sign up. We'll see how many people show up. For people, it's a great name, so hell of a name. I'd love for people in the chat. One thing I'd like to see is just your role and size of company. If you mind putting that in the chat. We want to make sure this is relevant and has strong takeaways as possible. I'd love to see the size of companies people are at and what's the roles. Awesome.
Thanks.
All right,
Oh,
here
Rusty,
we go.
there he is. How you doing? What up, Rusty?
AEs, sales leaders. Awesome.
MD's here.
Amazing. All right, one other fun question, and then we'll hop into the meat of this. If you're just joining, I'm asking everyone to put your role and the size of company you're at. Make sure we're as relevant as possible for people that don't know Shay, and we'll get into the intro, but he's had a really unique experience being at a company from, sub 10 people, sub a couple 100,000 in ARR up to a company that now has hundreds of millions in ARR post-acquisition. So I think there's a lot of relevant learnings here for people. Next question to get people started. First concert you ever went to in your life? I'll start. I think mine's Red Hot Chili Peppers. I was like 15. And I think it's still
Nice.
the best concert I went to.
For people that know me, this shouldn't be surprising. I went to a Sugar Ray concert. Yeah. So there it is.
Avril Lavigne, epic. Awesome. All right, cool. Let's hop into it. I know people have busy schedules or likely in between meetings or a lot of other things they can do. I just want to say, first off, I appreciate you taking some time to try to get better. I think that I look at sales and what we do as a profession, and it should be trained, worked on, watch film on, etc. Hopefully you take away from some of this today that someone like Shay is taking the profession really serious. He's learned from some great people, and there should be some really good nuggets here to take away and start using. The reason why we wanted to put together this session today is a lot of people talk about, hey, we need to do more pipe jam. We need to get AEs to prospect. We need to get more from our BDR team. But there's not a lot of guidance on how, right? So when I say how, I don't mean how are we crafting a magical email or, what's the right number of dials we need to do? I mean, if you're leading an SDR team, leading an AE team, or want to be leading a team in the future, how do you teach the team how to do this well and get the right behaviors at scale, which Shay, you're well aware of, is getting harder and harder as organizations grow. So we're going to approach this in 3 different sections. One on kind of what's the operating cadence? How do you tier up your accounts, right? I think about that as what's the initial part of the strategy. The second part on your plan, right? So Shay and I prep for this. It's really, you got to have a plan to be able to do this well and consistently. And then the last part is how do you form and craft a unique point of view that allows you to add value. Shay will talk about value deposits here within an account and earn the right to get a seat at the table. So I think, Shea, I'd love to hear just a quick intro from you, your story. And one thing I'd like you to add is just who you've had the opportunity to learn from, right? Like you've been exposed to some really great leaders, multiple CROs, board members, that has kind of shaped and crafted your style.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Todd. So I got started at HEAP about 9 years ago. I was the first BDR there, and then worked there as an AE for quite a while, and then got into management about 5 years ago. I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of different sales leaders, folks like Neil George, Dennis Dresser. I've had the pleasure of working with Scott Andrew, James Couture, Doug Williams. And then I've also been mentored and advised by folks like Scott Davis and Dan Fougere. And I think to be specific to this topic, I think some of the sales leaders that have taught me the most about developing discipline and rigor around account planning and pipeline generation are folks like Dan Fougere, James Couture, Sean Andrew, that all came from, I think, a culture where PG was held in high regard. A lot of these folks came from places like Datadog and MongoDB. And I've had the pleasure of learning from them and then getting to implement a lot of that at HEAP and now Contentsquare.
And for people that don't recognize some of the names, like for CRO at Datadog, CRO at Anaplan when the company was taken public, Adobe, a lot of some of the big, most successful software companies that I think has shaped where you are today, Shea. Let's hop into it, right? I know you've built really successful teams. I know that you've acquired some teams and had to do some of the right training and performance management. Really around this topic on, okay, I'm a more junior sales leader, I'm a VP of sales that's trying to turn on outbound for the first time. I'd love for you to share, and I know you have a couple templates on how do you approach that, right? What are some of the biggest learnings and how do you kind of get this machine going?
Yeah, so we can get into the account actual planning itself. I think one of the biggest things I learned from someone like Dan Fougere was you got to build a culture around pipeline generation. I think a lot of times pipeline generation is viewed as this monotonous, very tedious, forced task upon yourself as an AE or the team. And I don't think it has to be that way. It could be viewed as a team sport. You can make it really fun. As an example, I was challenged at the time by Dan Fougere, who was my advisor, to go change that culture. And what I did is I flew out to New York. I brought my entire team into the New York office, and we started cold calling as a team. And I made a fool out of myself, having not cold called in 4 years. But we made it fun. You know, we had some competitions. We put some money on the table to drive meetings. But that really, I think, kind of sparked a culture that then we started to roll with. So then I can get kind of the specifics of account planning itself. So if I screen share here, can I just launch a window? Awesome. Let's do, I think this is stage. Nice. Let me know if you can see this, Todd.
All good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the first thing is after you've developed the culture, a fun culture around pipeline generation, then you need an operational cadence to go along with it. So if we just kind of look at a week over week accounting plan, then these are the big pillars to this. First, you're going to pick an account or a couple accounts for the week or for the month. You're going to build a value pyramid. We'll talk about what a value pyramid is for each of those accounts to inform a lot of the messaging that you'll use to create value deposits. Then you're going to create a PG plan. I like to use those as tabs inside of a spreadsheet, which I'll go through. Leverage a smoke report, which is really to gather signal on which accounts, what contacts you're going to be going after. Load those into what I call the crack the ice tab, and really hope to focus on those accounts and drive them into qualified opportunities that you can manage through a more intense account plan itself. Do you want me to talk a little bit about what kind of managers, kind of role they play in this?
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm looking at a comment from Mark, but I'm an enterprise AE. Why do I have to cold call? Or you say, hey, I don't have time to prospect. I think kind of what you're getting at in the manager points here are how do you drive the right behaviors, show the level of importance? What are some of your tips and tricks there?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing again comes back to culture. I think one of the most impactful things that I had seen from some of the leaders that came from Mongo was they had an AE who had multiple seven-figure years in a row, and outbound pipeline generation and hunting led to those seven-figure years. I've got other AEs that I've worked closely with at Heap and now Contentsquare that have had those seven-figure years that would attest to outbound pipeline generation is the lifeblood to having and the key to having those seven-figure years. So you got to know that first and foremost, and then as an AE, you got to make that time week over week to do the PG itself. And as a manager, it needs to be something that you inspect and expect, right? So you can't expect something that you're not managing or putting a focus on. So that's why first bullet here, like in my one-on-ones, the first thing that we go through is the pipeline generation plan for the week, right? And we get into that. Let's take a look at the 2 accounts that you plan to go after, the ones that you are continuing to work for maybe the week prior. And are you getting high, wide, and deep, right? Are you looking at going after not just the business stakeholders, but the technical stakeholders? What's your top-down and bottom-up approach? And then taking a look at what is the messaging that you're utilizing and maybe what are the mediums that are working versus not working. So those are the things that you just have to have top of mind. And as a manager, you have to consistently drive week over week.
And you get into how you start to approach that, right? So from like an account tiering standpoint, how many accounts you want to be working, et cetera.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe I can talk about this without sharing my screen necessarily. So big learning for me, right? When I first started managing at Heap, I think a lot of leaders probably experience this at companies I think a lot of the folks who are working at companies of similar size. Every AE you probably have somewhere between like 200 and 500 accounts. And I think the problem with that I had learned is it's very easy for the AE and even the managers themselves to say, hey, we tried 5 to 10 contacts there. We ran them through an 8-step sequence and it just didn't work. We didn't get any bites, we didn't get any meetings, and move on, recycle the account and go to the next. And so what you kind of end up with is a spray and pray approach. And that doesn't work these days. What you end up with is like a lot of burned accounts. And I think what I noticed is the more that we placed the focus on going high, wide, and deep into a smaller number of accounts, we were far more successful. So to kind of make that transition, what we started to do is we moved from from like 200 to 500 accounts to 40, just to create that focus. And that was very successful. And then we implemented some other measures about what are some of the things that you need to do in order to actually work a successful account. Pardon me, I'm getting an ad. And what that looked like was you needed to create a value pyramid and come to the table with a point of view on how we could drive value to any given account in your patch. You had very tailored and personalized messaging. And then look, like there are going to be times where you work an account and exhaust it. You reached out to 20, 25, maybe 30 contacts in an account. You have a couple conversations and you find out, hey, they're using the competitor's software and they're on an agreement for the next 3 years. Okay, as a manager, I see that you work the account. You found out there's not really an opportunity for us here in the next 3 years. Okay, let's recycle the account. I have a slush fund that I'm willing to actually recycle the account with, but I want to make sure that you gave that account, a pretty good try.
What goes in, and I agree with you, Shay. I think especially earlier in my career, it was like, hey, I need more accounts. And now most of the successful reps that I know are usually fighting for, hey, I only want to work a small number of accounts, right?
Yeah.
What gave you the confidence to kind of whittle that down if you're a rep on your team at 200 or 500, whittling that down to 40? And yeah, how did you approach that?
Because this started back when at Heap, we had a mid-market quota that was really hard to hit. And the only way to hit it was you do a high number of transactions because the ACV was so low, or you go find some 6-figure deal, right? And I remember working with one of my AEs, and we kind of cracked the code on this. And the secret was like true value selling to put a premium on our product and more or less manufacture that six-figure deal, right? We really pushed ourselves to increase that ACV and sell on the premise of value, not features and functionality. So when you dovetail out of that and you start to spend a lot of the time focused on how do we deliver value from the very onset, from the initial outreach into all of these conversations into an enterprise company, and you start talking to 20, 30 people at an organization or key stakeholders and buying this, and you start articulating the value to each of them, then you're putting yourself in a position to close much larger deals. And I think what we ended up realizing, and I know AEs probably on this call realize this too, is like the time it takes to close a 20, 30K deal and a 300K to 500K deal is probably about the same time, right? It's just about how you go about doing it. And a lot of it, if you just focus on understanding the company, understanding the individuals that you're going after and how you can articulate value to each of them, you're putting yourself in a position, I think, to take better advantage of the time that you're working that account. Because you'll end up with a 300 to 500K deal versus 20, 30.
Got it. So Shay, big learnings for me when it comes to kind of account tiering, account selection, right? It's kind of working together as a team, whether that's SDR, leader, AE, everyone involved to make sure, hey, are we putting our time and resources in what we believe to be the highest value areas? Focus on going deep rather than going wide in terms of number of accounts, right? And then now you're starting to think about, okay, what's the plan? Who are the people in that account? How do I form our POV? How do I actually earn the right to have these conversations? I'd love to see you transition into kind of what the account plan looks like, what like that contact-based strategy looks like, and share that with some of the group.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll walk through this pretty quickly. And if folks have questions, feel free to obviously stop me. Taylor, I'll count on you for that. Okay, so I want to quickly just walk through how you, at least, again, this is a suggestion. There's lots of different ways to riff off of this. I've seen it done with my own teams who take this as a template more or less and then riff from it. But I'll walk through kind of how to manage your patch and an account plan, maybe over the course of something like a week, right? So first thing is you're going to have your list of accounts, and this is a spreadsheet and a template that I've come to use. It gets iterated on every quarter. But what you have here and what you're looking at is what we call the front page. And on the front page, what you have is your list of accounts. I've anonymized everything into this. So you're going to have a larger list of accounts, obviously. But one of the things that's key here is you've got the tiering, right? Type of prospect or customer that you've got here. And then you've got some signal here as to like, have we made contact or is there any engagement, et cetera. And then you've got some other signals here as to what's hot, what's medium, what's warming, what's in my bullpen. And some other things that I think would be helpful to you and maybe your BDR if this is a collaborative document for the both of you. All right. So when you've got your accounts here, the next thing you want to do is when you're picking the accounts that you go after on a weekly basis, or if you're making a plan for the month, pick an account or two and then build a value pyramid. I think we're going to get into what that looks like, Todd, maybe in a little bit. But the idea, and I'll kind of just show this at a flash, is build some, do some research and build a point of view. So understand what's the company driving at. What are they focused on from a strategy standpoint? How are they planning to actually execute on some of those strategies? And what are the risks and key success drivers to those digital initiatives? That's at least the case for us. And that informs a lot of the messaging that you then start to absorb for more personalized or tailored messaging that you and or your BDR are going to execute on. Right. So you have all of that here. What I like to see is that folks pick contacts that they're going to go after. A lot of that is built into Sales Nav. I know folks are probably pretty familiar with that. But then they've got some other notes here. Who's going to own this? Some updates on the messaging or the communication, etc. Next thing is I like to have a smoke report here. Smoke report is strictly signal on any account. So what I like to see is, or the mantra goes, where there's smoke, there's fire. So if you start to see an account, display some signal either through 6sense, through G2, through Drift, through Champify, through MQLs, or engaging with the site, I like to see that logged here. And then that might actually inform, maybe these are some of the accounts that we go after, or some of the contacts that we go after because we see some engagement from them. They're warmer leads. And then the idea is to start moving them into what I call crack the ice. And crack the ice are accounts that you started to develop relationships with, you've had some contact with, you've had some conversations with, you've done some discovery, and you pull all those communications, the discovery points back into this sheet, so that ultimately what we're trying to drive towards is leveraging all of this information to create a qualified opportunity.
Shay, question for you. When you start to think about, okay, you've narrowed in on the accounts, you narrowed in on the contacts within an individual account, how do you guide the reps? Like, do you have a specific rule of, hey, we need to go 5 people deep or 8 people deep, or we need someone from this title and that title? Like, in theory, yes, that all makes sense. But at scale, how do you get the reps to do that? What rules or guidance do you use?
Yeah. So at Keep and Contentsquare, it's a little difficult. I think that for us, it's a matter of positioning sometimes. So it depends on, are you going after what vertical, what persona type, right? What's their stack look like? And it determines a lot of the positioning for the messaging that you're going after. So at a high level, like what I try to do is try to guide my team with some rules around, okay, if you're going after a B2B SaaS company and someone on the data team, you're probably looking at trying to talk about the value that Keep Connect, our ETL solution, could bring to that team, right? So it informs a lot of the messaging, but you got to tie that back to a lot of the things that you've researched and developed as part of your point of view from the value pyramid. Those are the high level things. I think in my one-on-ones, when we're looking at actual PG plans as a manager, I'm looking at, okay, what does your actual plan look like? What are the tactical things that you're doing to break into this company? I want to see who you're going after. What messaging are you using? What mediums are working? And as a manager, what I start to kind of parse out is maybe there are certain tactics or strategies that work for certain companies at certain times of the year. And I then start to relay that back to the team, hoping that I can create upticks across the entire organization.
Got it. So what I'm hearing, and very similar for us at Champify, right? We have aligned on the accounts and how many we think is realistic for an AE to do the right level of outreach that we deem, high quality, high likelihood of success. We coming up with the point of view, or you call it a value pyramid, of what we believe the value prop is to that individual organization. Obviously, news or where there's smoke or timing of the year can influence that. And then you're working with the reps to say, okay, A, are we getting deep enough? We know we need to touch a certain number of accounts. And then within those accounts, there's different personas that have slightly different value props. And it's important that you're kind of peppering all of those different value props to find the entry point. Is that a fair summary, or anything you'd add to that?
Bingo. No, I think that's it, right? Like you circle the castle until you find some entry point, right? And especially for us at Keep and Contentsquare, the case is that there are multiple entry points, right? There are different tactics that you can employ, different ways to articulate value. You got to find that entry.
Love it. I want to take a question from the crowd, Stephen. For AEs who are aligned to a team of BDRs, most of what you're talking about, Shay, is fortunate enough to have some BDR support. What's a great partnership look like? And what have you seen from AEs that are in unison with their BDRs and driving kind of outsized results compared to the rest of the field?
Yeah. So, okay, at a high level, I think that it needs to be more of a mentor-mentee type of relationship, right? Like that BDR gets the opportunity to learn from the AE, and the AE actually gets an opportunity, I think, to teach that BDR a lot of things. It reinforces a lot of, I think, the learnings and tactics and strategies that the AE is going to be employing on a week-to-week basis. From there, it's what I've seen is kind of the imperative piece to a successful relationship is an operational cadence where there's rigor and discipline. So I'll give you an example. When we rolled this out, and I do a training every time we get kind of a new set of BDRs that are there to support the team, there is a meeting on Thursday where an AE delivers the new accounts that they are going to be tackling together the following week. So the delivery of those accounts happens Thursday afternoon. Friday morning, they're going to review those accounts together. Now, part of the delivery of those accounts from the AE is it's not just, hey, here are the 2 accounts that I'm going after. There is a value pyramid that is developed for each of them. The contacts that they're going to go after are also outlined, and some research associated with each of the contacts is also denoted in kind of the PG plan tab I was showing there earlier, with some suggested messaging, right? And this really sets up your BDR for success. Now, if you just toss them, hey, here's 2 companies, go for it. As the AE, you can't really expect much, right? So you give them the opportunity to review together that plan going forth to the next week, that Friday morning, because Monday morning, I want my BDR coming in and hitting the ground running right away. I also, selfishly, as the manager of the AEs, I want them to be able to come in Monday morning and hit the ground running, right? But I think what you end up finding is like that those 2 pieces set up success for the week, the next week coming up. And then the other piece that I've seen is just constant communication between the AE and the BDR. Like as soon as there is some reply to some outbound outreach by the BDR to maybe one of those contacts, it's like, even if it's some small response, like there's some sort of communication engagement between the 2 about what do we do here? It's like, 1, celebrate the win that you got some reply, or hey, like a meeting got set, celebrate that. That's amazing, right? And then get really tactical about, all right, what do we do next? Or get strategic about, okay, we had 3 conversations with these folks on the product side. What do we do now? And that's where I've seen that relationship blossom. And there's ways to make it fun too. Like I've suggested to some of these folks, like, I mean, early on when I was a BDR, and I've suggested this to my team, it's like, throw some incentive out there, put some cash on the table. You go get a meeting from me, I'll give you $400, whatever, right? There's ways to make this really fun, and I think you can have a good time with it.
There's a lot of gold in there, and I think a lot of the things you said are really important, specifically around the operating cadence. I see people like Liam and Rusty and Sarah, some leaders on this call, right? Where it's like, okay, how do I make this fun? How do I keep the team motivated? How do I have the right cadence in place to make sure this is consistently top of mind? One detail you said, Shea, that I think is critically important here is I think the best PG-oriented leaders, both on the AE and SDR side, are very rigorous when it comes to, hey, in our one-on-one, the reps know the first 10 minutes we're going to be talking about this PG plan. Like there's no hiding from it. It shows that how important it is relevant to everything else you're doing. And without that type of rigor, what ends up happening is most AE leaders know and AEs know you're in deal gossip mode, right? You're always going to talk about another deal, what's happening. And I think that rigor is extremely important.
One other thing, just to add to that, I got this from, I didn't mention him, I should have. Zach Sikora is another great leader that I got the opportunity to work for. I actually was the flag bearer for PG for a while, and we had a PG Tuesday meeting, 25 minutes, whole company, whole sales team, right? And it was a platform to share what worked in the prior week. If you set a couple meetings, amazing. Get on stage, put a couple slides together, build the template for the outreach that you did, and share it with the team, right? And then what we ended up doing, towards before getting acquired at Heap, was we did these every Tuesday. We had a whole list of little tactics and plays that worked. We downloaded them, we templatized them. We have 60 pages of plays that you can now just rinse and repeat, right? Which is cool. So then it's like, hey, I'm like struggling with what to do here. I want to get creative. You don't have to just rely on email, LinkedIn, and phone calls, right? But you've got 60 pages of plays that have worked in the past for other folks. Go hit the playbook. Just find something you can rinse and repeat.
I love that. We have about 15 minutes left. Shea, I'm going to share my screen for a couple minutes, and I want to take it even a click deeper of, okay, we've aligned on the accounts. We know how deep we need to get there. We know the personas. I think the hardest part of all of this is having that point of view, right? Like getting someone to read a message that shows, or answer a call and hear a message that's, wow, this person has done their homework. They have a hypothesis that may be worth exploring. So as I go through this, Shay, I'd love to hear your take on how we approach it at Champify, just to give people different flavors of this. And then I want to come back to a couple questions in the chat around nurture and kind of when people trade out accounts. So this is how we approach things in terms of an account plan, right? For anyone that worked with me before, you'll know that I'm very big on understanding as much as you can about a business, right? How do they earn money, right? What is their go-to-market? Who's their ICP? How are they doing competitively? Are they a winning or losing company? All of this starts to get you thinking in their mindset. The way we approach this information, Shay, in the prep call, we talked about this. Yes, it's a lot easier for public companies, right? There's a lot more out there, but now more than ever, between what you can find on job boards, people on podcasts, people talking and speaking engagements, people talking at events, there is a lot out there. You just have to search deeper. Here's a list of where we look. And then most of what our time is spent on is, once you've done a bunch of this research, you're basically gathering raw materials to be able to form your POV. So before I even talk about this, some of you might be saying, what the hell is a POV? Why are we even thinking in this language? The idea is doing the research isn't enough, right? What's really important is, if you've done your research, you should have gobs of potential information, gobs of potential messaging. What's the most critical part of this is how, from SDR, AE, sales leader that's helping these individuals, what stands out to these people is, how do you synthesize a lot of information to be extremely relevant, extremely timely, right? You ultimately, someone that coached me in early in my career, you should be able to talk as if you're sitting at their all hands meeting, right? When you have that level of detail, that's what earns the right. And then the final part is, a POV doesn't necessarily need to be right. This is not an offer, right? What you're really trying to get them to do is, some people say kind of poke the bear. You're really trying to get them to say, okay, this is thought-provoking. There's some type of insight. This person has changed the way that I'm thinking. So to make this a bit more concrete, we usually look at this in kind of one of 5 different areas, right? Like, how are you challenging their current status quo? Right? How can you give them a different way to think about a problem? You're an expert, right? Shay, you've been talking about digital analytics, product analytics for 9 years, right? You've talked to hundreds of businesses. You should be an expert to be able to challenge that status quo. And if you don't have that experience at one company, we're all lucky that Gong and Clary and all of these tools exist to get that information. I think the second thing is, how do you empathize with some of the things they're going with? We sell to SDR leaders, demand gen leaders, sales leaders. Almost everyone's trying to figure out outbound right now. Almost everyone is having a harder time hitting their goals. And the more you can empathize with that through stories, the better. Same idea with painting a bold vision or uncovering a problem, or trying to understand, hey, I might have talked to a couple ICs on the team, or I might have read something on RepView for us. Your version may be Glassdoor or something else, but you're really trying to get to what's a root cause of a potential issue, that you're really broadening their scope on an understanding of the problem. So Shay, I don't know if any of these stick out, or any of these that you feel like you help your team narrow in on, or any learnings that you've had that are similar to this or a different flavor.
I think that this is all spot on. What it made me think of, I think the other big reason for developing a POV is it's avoiding sales deficit disorder, right? The problem with a lot of sales folks is, you don't understand their business, you're not listening. Those are the 2 symptoms, right? And the reason that POV is so important is, it shows that you are trying to do your best to understand that business before even having had a conversation. And that puts you in a position to make those value deposits.
I love that. I personally think, after leading a bunch of sales teams, is that the problem when people see low activity, when the problems are, people aren't seeing results, because they actually don't know what to do, right? And I think it's really important to show, hey, this is what great looks like. Here's how we celebrate the wins, how we put together that 60 pages of different plays that have worked in the past. So couldn't agree more, Shay. I want to open it up for questions. I have one for you, Shay. Before anyone else have questions, please put them in the chat. But Shay, the question I have for you is, how do you think about nurture? I had a customer of ours the other day. This is an SVP of sales that has run sales at multiple large companies and high growth companies. And he said, nurture is the new PG, right? Like you have to be so top of mind for these people so that when problems start to arise, you're there. How do you think about nurture? What have you learned on that front? How do you guide your team to do that well, which is a complex topic?
So I think it's a really good question. The way I think about nurture is, I think about how we've done nurture poorly, and then the learnings from that in order to actually do nurture correctly. So I think a lot of times, what happened in at least early on in my career is you'd have conversations, weren't so diligent about taking notes about the conversations that you were having or the information that you were discovering, and you lost all that context, right? And so I think that's part of kind of what comes back to the big overarching message here, which is like you have to be organized, you have to have a plan. And so I think it really is a testament, like in order to nurture well, you have to document a lot of the information you're getting from either a discovery standpoint, or that you're learning from the perimeter, like by just researching the company. And so once you have all of this downloaded, right, then what I would suggest is, finding out when is a better time to reach out. Obviously, we do that through discovery. And then you have a back burner list that you can always come back to and hit. But you can do the outreach at the appropriate time with meaningful context. I think that's really important. What people hate at the customer accounts or the prospect accounts is, they got beat to a pulp with outreach from some AE in their BDR for 3 months, and then told them, hey, we're not interested. 6 months later, a new AE who got the account in their BDR starts doing the exact same thing, and pretty soon you pissed off that customer and they're never going to buy.
I'm going to put you on the spot, Shea, with the last question I have. And then if there's no more questions in the chat, we'll wrap. Where do you think most people go wrong here? Where do you think most sales leadership teams go wrong with getting people to do pipeline generation at a high level?
I mean, from my perspective, it's a leadership thing, right? I think that the folks that get this wrong really don't do a good job of turning around the culture, first and foremost, and then make it a priority. I think a lot of teams that I've seen in the past say, hey, we need a PG, but then don't make it a focal point week in, week out. And that's where I think you as a leader have a lot of leverage, right? You can make this fun, you can make it creative, and you can keep it at the forefront of everybody's focus. You just have to be aligned top to bottom through the leadership organization, and be willing to put yourself out there as a leader. You got to get vulnerable. I got to tell you, like that really was the turning point, right? Is myself getting involved with the PG. Like I can't expect my AEs and BDRs to do the outreach if I'm not willing to do it myself, right? And so getting involved as the leader and changing that culture, and then making sure top to bottom that it was a focal point week in, week out, PG Tuesdays. It was something the leadership team hammered on every week and measured us on was I think a big component to this and being successful. If you don't do that and you just say, hey, like, I'm just going to take a look at this once every quarter, once every month, it's probably not going to go well for you.
Great learnings. Hard to learn that stuff without seeing a lot of it firsthand. Shea, I just want to say I appreciate you making some time and sharing some of your learnings. I really respect how you've gone about it, because you've done this all from the trenches, right? You've made a lot of the mistakes. You've had a lot of the learnings. You've seen different flavors of the playbook. I'll leave people with 3 points. If you look on the right-hand side next to the chat, there's a docs tab. We have a whole guide on building a PG culture. Shea, the last thing you just said, that rung true for some of the leadership team at Harness. Talks about the CRO as the first one on Tuesday mornings, making cold calls with the team. I think it does start with the top. There's also a link to our next webinar, which is going to be in August, which has the CMO from Jellyfish, a guy named Kyle Lacey, around making pipeline bets. If you want to register for that, great. Otherwise, I will email people the POV template I walked through. I want to thank everyone for making some time today. We need to let Shea go and listen to Sugar Ray. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Good to see you, Shea. Appreciate the time.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Take care. See ya.